Thank you very much. And first, I'd like to thank Bob and Alexander and Dana for the terrific job they've done in turning this debate series into reality. And I'd like to thank all of you for showing up on such a miserable evening to hear a debate about what I do think is one of the most important issues that we could possibly talk about. No doubt many of you are asking yourselves tonight, why should America take on the thankless task of policing the globe? To answer that question, start by asking, does the world need a policeman? That's like asking whether New York City needs a police force. As long as evil exists, someone will have to protect peaceful people from predators. The international system is no different in this regard from your own neighborhood, except that predators abroad are far more dangerous than ordinary robbers, rapists, and murderers. They are, if given half a chance, mass robbers, mass rapists, mass murderers. Without an effective police force, the world community would fall apart faster and more completely than New York City did in the 1970s. There are, to be sure, lots of international laws on the books prohibiting genocide, landmines, biological weapons, and other nasty things. But without enforcement mechanisms, they are as worthless as the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which outlawed war as an instrument of national policy 11 years before the Wehrmacht rolled into Poland. The hope of idealistic liberals for more than a century has been that some international organization would punish the wicked. But the League of Nations was a dismal failure, and the UN is not much better. The best multilateral alternative is probably NATO. But from Bosnia to Afghanistan, we have seen time and again that NATO has trouble acting effectively. In fact, 5 retired NATO generals have just issued a report that bemoans the absence of a properly defined political objective, the absence of an integrated strategy to achieve that objective, and the absence of capabilities to implement the strategy. Now, that doesn't mean we should abandon NATO. It does mean we should have no illusions that its European members can fend for themselves. So who does that leave to be the world's policeman? Belgium, Bolivia, Burkina Faso, Bangladesh? I think the answer is pretty obvious. It's the country with the most vibrant economy, the most fervent devotion to liberty, and the most powerful military. In the 19th century, Great Britain battled the enemies of all mankind, such as slave traders and pirates, preserved the balance of power on the continent, and kept the world seas open to commerce. Today, the only nation that can play an equivalent role is the United States of America. Allies will be needed, but America is, as Madeleine Albright said, the indispensable nation. Now, skeptics will reply that America has an isolationist past and no desire to play global cop. But rumors of American isolationism are greatly exaggerated. Since the earliest days of the Republic, American traders, missionaries, and soldiers have penetrated the farthest corners of the world, and they have a long history of upholding civilized norms. I am reminded, in fact, of the words spoken 104 years ago by a great New Yorker. He said, "Chronic wrongdoing, or an impotence which results in a general loosening of the ties of civilized society, may ultimately require intervention by some civilized nation. And in the Western Hemisphere, the adherence of the United States to the Monroe Doctrine may force the United States, however reluctantly, in flagrant cases of such wrongdoing or impotence, to the exercise of an international police power." Now, when Teddy Roosevelt spoke those words, the Western Hemisphere was the only place where the U.S. exercised military hegemony. Today, America exercises almost as much power everywhere around the world as we once had, only in the Caribbean. In fact, we have more power than any other state in history. Thus, by Roosevelt's logic, the U.S. is obligated to defend civilization, and that is precisely what we are doing. That is why American troops have fought in places like Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq to help restore the rule of law and uphold human rights. That is why American troops are still stationed from South Korea to Germany to prevent aggression and a return of dangerous rivalries. That is why the U.S. Navy patrols the world's oceans to prevent the closing of choke points such as the Straits of Hormuz. And that's why numerous agencies of the U.S. government work to combat terrorism and to stop the spread of weapons of mass destruction. That is what being the world's policeman is all about. Of course, we cannot right every wrong nor intervene everywhere. We have to use prudence and judgment in the exercise of our power, something we have not always done in recent years. But America's occasional missteps should not lead us to abdicate our indispensable role, any more than the NYPD should stop doing its vital work simply because cops occasionally do the wrong thing. On balance, the NYPD still does far more good than harm, and so does the United States of America. In fact, America has been the greatest force for good in the world in the past century. Just think of what happened when we did not act as global cop. Think of what happened in 1914 and 1939. By contrast, think of what happened when we did act as global cop. Think of what happened in 1945 and 1989. American intervention made possible the defeat of Nazism and communism. American isolationism made possible the outbreak of 2 world wars. As these examples demonstrate, there is nothing altruistic about our Globocop role. As the world's most prosperous country, and as a country that depends for its prosperity on the free flow of people, capital, and products, we are the biggest beneficiaries of the liberal international order that we safeguard. Compared with the benefits that we gain, the financial costs are trivial. We currently spend 4% of our GDP on defense, a lot less than the average during the past 4 decades. At 4 cents on the dollar, preserving international peace and stability is a bargain. Now, I imagine the other side will claim that our international policing function makes us hated and leads to greater violence against us. That is sometimes the case, and I will be the first to admit it. But we are as often reviled for not acting, for not stopping the genocide in Rwanda or Darfur, for not imposing peace between the Israelis and Palestinians. And yes, there is a cost to be paid for action, as we've learned in Iraq. But there is also a cost to be paid for inaction. During the 1990s, we ignored our policing responsibilities in Afghanistan. As the civil war raged between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance, our leaders said, in essence, what Britain's leaders said in the 1930s, that there was no reason to be concerned about a quarrel in a faraway country between people of whom we know nothing. Well, on 9/11, we found out why we should care. The answer can be seen a few miles from here, where the World Trade Center once stood. 9/11 should have taught us that we cannot ignore potential peril, nor count on others to protect us. We must safeguard ourselves, and not simply by launching retaliatory strikes after thousands, perhaps millions, have perished. We need to play a proactive role. We need to police areas of unrest and to do what we can to bring decent government to war-torn lands. If we fail to act, we, as the mightiest nation in the world, will pay the heaviest price. I therefore urge you to heed Theodore Roosevelt's admonition and to vote in favor of America exercising an international police power. Thank you.